Hitler has worked his way to become the leader of Nazi Germany. Appealing to German nationalism, he has largely reunited the German diaspora across Europe, declared the Jews as second-class citizens, and has begun his conquest. Hitler has had his first defeat with the Battle of Britain. Germany is an alliance with Italy and Japan. These Axis powers are all intent on imperial expansion. It is 1940, and England, France, and their colonies are at war with Germany. Italy, under Benito Mussolini, would invade Egypt from the Italian colony of Libya on the 9th September 1940. His goal was the Suez Canal. It was a disaster. February 1941, Hitler would send the Afrika Korps to North Africa to reinforce the faltering Italians. It was headed up by Erwin Rommel. Battles for control of Libya and Egypt followed, with advances and retreats until the Second Battle of El Alamein. In October 1942, when the 8th Army defeated the German-Italian Panzer Army Africa and forced its remnants into Tunisia. With the entry of the US forces and assets into the war during Operation Torch, the Axis troops, trapped in an Allied pincer, would surrender in May 1943. On the 27th of September 1940, the Tripartite Pact was signed in Berlin between Japan, Italy, and Germany. Slovakia, Hungary, and Bulgaria would join the pact in November 1940. Yugoslavia would also join the Tripartite Pact, fearing invasion from the Axis, but this would cause widespread demonstrations and lead to a coup d'état in March 1941. Hitler immediately ordered his armies to subdue Yugoslavia. On April 6, 1941, Germany invaded Yugoslavia, resulting in its capitulation on April 17, 1941. Yugoslavia was subsequently divided amongst Germany, Hungary, Italy, and Bulgaria. Italy would mount a disastrous offensive on Greece on the 28th October 1940. Hitler chose to support Italy, stalling his planned invasion of Russia to invade Greece. This move would protect the Romanian oil fields from Allied attack and would protect the Balkan flank. The Germans quickly captured Thessaloniki on April 9, 1941, and then isolated the main body of the Greek army. The Greek army capitulated on April 22. Thermopylae, defended by a British rear guard, was overrun by the Germans, who occupied Athens on April 27. The remainder of the British force in Greece were evacuated. Mainland Greece was divided between Germany, Italy, and Bulgaria. German paratroopers landed in Crete on May 20, 1941, at Maleme. The Allied troops from New Zealand would evacuate, and Germany would have full control by May 31st. Hitler could now focus on Operation Barbarossa. Hitler expected the campaign to be fast and easy. It was not. On the 22nd of June 1941, with a massive attack force, Hitler invaded Russia, breaking his pact with Stalin. His goal was to gain territory and much-needed resources. He hoped this would also lead to Britain's surrender. The Germans advanced swiftly. The cold Russian winter would slow the advance. On 7th of December 1941, Japan attacked the American fleet based at Pearl Harbor. 4 days later, Hitler declared war against the United States. Unofficially, the US had been supplying Russia through the Lend-Lease Act, enacted March of 1941. Meanwhile, December 1941, the Russian campaign was a disaster. The German advance had been halted, with Germany losing over 400,000 men, 1,300 tanks, 2,000 guns, and masses of other equipment. The Russian winter had taken its toll on the German troops, and supply lines were stretched for the Germans, who were expected to have had a swift campaign. Hitler now appointed himself as the head of the High Command of the German Army. In June 1942, Germany would lead another offensive in Russia, hoping to capture the oil fields of Baku, Azerbaijan. They did not achieve their objective. Instead, a protracted siege at Stalingrad would deplete German resources. Hitler regrouped his forces in the east and had hoped to cut off a large bulge in the Russian line at the Battle of Kursk in July and August of 1943. Better prepared Soviet forces won an overwhelming victory over the Germans and had their sights set on Berlin. This battle would be the largest tank battle the world had ever seen. On July 31, 1941, around the same time as Operation Barbarossa, Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command, would send an order to Reinhard Heydrich, the head of the security branch of the SS, to authorize a final solution of the Jewish question. In the absence of any documented evidence that Adolf Hitler personally premeditated the final solution, the debate continues around Hitler's direct responsibility for the deaths of up to 6 million Jews. In May 1943, Hitler would discuss the possibility of fascist collapse in Italy and ordered the OKW to prepare an occupation force just in case. July 1943, after the Allied invasion of Sicily, Mussolini would face a vote of no confidence and would be arrested and incarcerated at Campo Imperatore Resort in Abruzzo. Italy would sign an armistice with the Allies on the 3rd of September 1943, prompting Germany's occupation of northern and central Italy to disarm the Italian army. The Allies landed in Italy on the same day, in Calabria and Taranto. Mussolini would be rescued by German commando troops on the 12th of September and installed as the leader of a puppet regime in the northern occupied part of Italy. After months of fighting, General Heinrich von Vietinghoff, commander-in-chief of the Western Front, surrendered on the 29th of April, formally bringing the Italian campaign to an end on the 2nd of May 1945. As for Mussolini, he would be caught on the 27th of April 1945 near Lake Como, while attempting an escape to Switzerland. The next day, he was shot. His body would be transported to Milan and on the 29th of April, hung upside down from a roof of a service station where it would be desecrated. Hitler was expecting an Allied invasion on the Western Front at some point in time. The Allies had hinted, via double agents, of an invasion at Calais, due to its location to Dover. German intelligence had their eye on the 1st United States Army Group under General Patton. FUSAG was a group of troops, tanks, and landing craft. The only snag, none of it was real. It was a dummy army set to confuse Hitler. And it did. On the 6th of June, 1944, the Allied armies landed in northern France in the largest amphibious operation in history, Operation Overlord. Hitler was at his mountain retreat at Berghof at the time of the invasion. His initial reaction was that Normandy was probably a diversion. Hitler slept through the invasion's beginning, believing Calais was the main invasion point. By the time Hitler became aware of the scale of the Normandy D-Day landings, it was too late. Many under Hitler's command could smell defeat. On 20th of July, 1944, a bomb would be placed close to Hitler in his wolf's lair at Rastenburg. The assassination attempt, part of a greater plan to depose Hitler and the Nazis, would fail. Hitler survived because the briefcase containing the bomb was moved unwittingly behind a leg of the heavy conference table which deflected much of the blast. Later, Hitler ordered savage reprisals. Late in 1944, Hitler faced the Soviet advance on the east and the Allies from the west. He chose to pose his reserves against the Allies. The offensives in 1945 were futile or didn't happen at all, as the German military leaders realized the dire situation that Germany was in. During a military conference on 22 April 1945, Hitler would learn that defeat was imminent. Hitler ordered everyone to leave, except Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl, Hans Krebs, and Wilhelm Burgdorf. He would admit all was lost, and told them of his plan to remain in Berlin. On the 29th April, Hitler married Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony in the Führerbunker. Later that afternoon, Hitler learned of Mussolini's fate on the previous day. Mussolini had been executed. On 30th April 1945, Soviet troops were within 500 meters of the Reich Chancellery when Hitler shot himself in the head and Braun bit into a cyanide capsule. It is believed that their corpses were doused with petrol and set on fire in the garden behind the Reich Chancellery. Other than some dental bridges, no other remains of Hitler or Braun were found. German General Alfred Jodl signed the Instrument of Surrender in Reims, France, on May 7, 1945, ending the war in Europe. Wilhelm Keitel signed the Act of Military Surrender in Berlin on May 8, 1945, as requested by Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin. The Berlin document was similar to the one signed in Reims, but the Soviets wanted it to be signed in Berlin. It is important that humanity remember this chapter in history, lest we are doomed to repeat it.